Hello, my name is Dan Deese. I'm with Electronic Data Systems, and this is a video tutorial on how to add content to the JAF, Judicial Assistance Association of Florida's website. Okay, so to add a page to the system, you've got here examples of old newsletters, bylaws, legislation, and past conferences. I'm going to break this out into a couple of different thoughts here. First off, the old newsletters are probably going to be static content that are just there for archival purposes. So they will be most likely you could actually use those as either a page content, or those could be considered a news content as well. So I'll show you what that means in a second. As far as bylaws and legislation is concerned, that's going to be, again, fairly static content. And the reason why I even mention whether it's static or whether it's changing information is because you can bring different types of content onto the site. And again, I'll show that to you in a second. So for past conferences, I would probably look at, do you want to just have text that talks about the past conference, maybe minutes, those type of things, or do you want to actually have show the pictures? If you're going to show the pictures, I would put those in the section that has the gallery images in it. So here's what I mean by the differences between what kind of content you want to add to the site and where these three type of examples would fit into those. So again, let's go to the site. When you're at the main site, you go to the very top here, content, add content. You have different types of content that you can add. A blog is kind of like a news type item, something that is like a status update or something like that. Event gallery we have designed to be a picture gallery. So let's say here, for example, under the gallery here, those automatically get put into our photo gallery section, and as you can see, as that we've already put in there, the format of these is to come and be shown kind of in a slideshow type situation. So when you click on these, it opens up a slideshow, and you can tag these galleries too if you want to search for them, but this is kind of the format. I think you can also open it up full screen too and view it this way. So if you're looking at, again, if we go back to the email, if you're looking for past conferences and you want to put pictures in there, this is probably the best way to put those in. For old newsletters and bylaws, legislation type, more static content, I think that the probably a better idea would be to go in and, like, About JAF page is an example of page content. So this is content that is going to go in the menu. It's going to be static for a pretty long amount of time, and it's something that isn't going to change very often, although it can be changed. Okay, so what we would do is, again, go into content, add content, and for the sake of adding some old newsletter or legislative content, let's go down to the page content type. And so this is where we say create a page. And let's say we're going to say that this is, what were we looking at again? We were looking at bylaws and legislation. So let's call this bylaws and legislation. Now, what you have here is sections of what is really a glorified form. This is the body section. This is going to be where most of the content goes, and we'll go back to that for a second. This is where the content is given its menu option. Where do you want it to go in the menu? And I believe what you referred to here as adding a page or a tab, the tab is probably what you're talking about as far as menu. So if we click on here provide a menu item, this is actually going to give you the title of the menu. If you want a description for the menu, you can put that there. Then what you do is you tell it where you want this menu item to go. We want it to go by default in the main menu, and then depending on where you want it to be, these are nested. And notice that the indents here have different a number of dashes here. That means that those are nested within these submenus. So in the case that we are going to do some bylaws, I would say that the bylaws probably will go under the for members section. And so when we put it in there, this weight will actually say, do you want it to go higher or lower? But I'll tell you what, I'll show you how to do something easier than that in a second. So URL path settings, this is going to be automatically generated, and this is just the address that you'll go to, that people will go to find the piece of content, and it usually gets based on the title that you give up the top here, what the title is. So let me just make sure that I change this here as well. And then from the revision information, I've set the system up to automatically revise the content every time you hit save. So again, I'll show that to you kind of at the end of creating this content. It's just a fail-safe that if you make a change and it's a significant change and you save it, then you want to go back and revert to an older change, you can do that. Just remember, you can't go forward, you can go backwards on those. Author information is done automatically as well. This is going to fill in based on whoever you're logged in as, and then this information also will get set automatically depending upon when you actually publish the content. Keep in mind that if you want something to show that maybe is back in time, you can actually go in and just change the format, change the date to make it go back so that you can reorder things if you want to reorder them. Lastly is the publish options, and this is again set by default. It's going to be default to published. Well, why would I not want it to be published? Maybe it's something that's a long document that I'm working on that I don't want it to go public right now because I have some edits that I want to make to it. Maybe I'm working on a document collaborating with another member, another content editor, and so I want them to be able to go into the content section and view the content, but I don't want it to be published yet. Maybe I want to start it and somebody else wants to finish it. So that's the reason why you would not publish content. From a promote from the front page, for certain themes, very basic themes, this is something that you would use, but in our particular theme, we don't want to promote anything to the front content because we want it to be protected by the login for the JAF member. So I would say to leave these last two blank under most circumstances. So again, now let's go back up to the actual, really the meat and potatoes of this particular content type. So what I do is I want to put information in the body of the content, and what that body content will look like is going to be something like here when we've got About JAF. This is the body of the content. Okay, and then really this is the footer, and this is the header, and this is actually the breadcrumb header, and then this is the header for the site. So this inside part here is the part that we're going to be editing. Okay, so when we go back, this is where we would go ahead and edit the content. Now, this particular Drupal theme, this Drupal site, uses what's called visual shortcodes. Visual shortcodes are a way for non-HTML coding people to put in content that is what we call rich content, where we have images and columns and things like that, and bold titles and subtitles. So how that would work is that this right now is using shortcodes. I'm going to go dynamic shortcodes, and that's just something behind the scenes there, but it's basically it gives you a little bit more options when it comes to the coding. So when I do that now, dynamic shortcodes, if you see over here, it looks like there's really nothing in here, and right now what we have to do is we have to go over and add content. So let's say, for the sake of for the sake of doing this content, we're going to make the bylaws are going to be 2 columns, and those 2 columns are going to have text in them, and we can put some title text at the top and that kind of thing. So what we want to do is we want to look at the bunch of different options we have here as far as the visual shortcodes are concerned. And what I'll do first is I want to put a column. It's actually called a column container, and let's see, rows for columns. Let's see, that's what I want. I want rows for columns, and I'm going to hit add. And now what that does is it creates a box that the columns will go in. And this padding just means, do I want there to be bigger margins on the top, left, right, or bottom? And that's, for the most part, we're going to leave this stuff alone here. If you wanted to put a border around it, you could do that. I would dissuade you from doing too many custom things to the different content, because you want to keep the overall look of the site. But there's ways to put background colors, and you can put an image as a background, that kind of thing. Generally, what I do is when I put the box in to contain my columns, I leave this pretty standard. Okay, so now if you look in our content, we have a row for columns. So now what that means is that I have to go in, and I have nothing in this yet, but if I go and I add, now this is where I'll go and add a column. Okay, now this is where it can get a little tricky, but for the most part, what this is saying is, the first thing you do for the shortcodes is you say, on this device, what do I want the columns, or the columns to do? It's okay to leave all these at auto, and basically what that means is that when the site determines that the browser that's being used is in a mobile device, it's going to do something. And if it's on a large mobile device like a pad, it's going to do something else. And then here under the a laptop, it's going to do something, and then on a desktop it'll do something. So what you would do here is, you're saying, okay, so what do the numbers mean? Well, there are basically 12 columns that go across the screen. Okay, so that's a grid that we talk about. So obviously, if I do 6 columns here, then what that's going to mean is that this particular column that I create is going to always take up half of the grid. Okay, so what I would do is I would go here for the 2 main devices. And you can do this for all of them, but what I would say is, let's go for these 3 devices. We're going to say this is going to be a column that's going to take up half the space. Now, why don't I put it here on the mobile, like the mobile phone? Most of the time, the columns are so small that you do not want to have 2 columns or multiple columns on a small phone device. So what these do, what the responsive design does, is it bumps those down underneath each other so that you can scroll down to see the different content. Okay, so that's part of the responsive design, so that that you deliver the website experience as accurately as you can across multiple devices that people might be looking at your site with. Okay, so again, we added the column shortcode. We could add paddings and margins and things like that if we wanted to, but for the most part, all I want is the structure. So I'm creating a 2 column layout. So right now I'm at 6 columns, excuse me, 6 spots on the grid for this one. Now when you look in here, notice that I have the row for columns, and now I have this column taking up half. Okay, so what I could do is I could come back in here, and I could create another column and hit add, and again go through all of the things that I went through before, and now I've got the 2 columns on there. When I want to go into the column, I actually would click on this and edit it, but I'm going to delete this column because I want to show you a little trick that I use, is that I have a 6 unit column, which is going to be half of the 12, and this theme is always 12, so that's the number. And then what I do is I can come over here, and this is the edit button. This is to add content in that column, and then this is a copy. So what I do is I can click on here, and now I have 2 of those columns there. Okay, so how is that useful? Well, it's terribly useful if, let's say, instead of doing the columns in 2 columns, I want to do, let's say, 4 columns. So what I'll do is 4 into 12 is going to be 3. So what I'll do is I want to say 3, 3, and 3. And if I hit save, notice that this column now is small. Well, what I can do is I can just go boom, boom, boom. Now I have my 4 columns. That might be a little small for what we want to do, but for the most part, that's I like to use that copy feature. So again, let me delete this one here. And another thing you can do as well, if you want to create an interesting look on the page, is you can come in and actually take one of the columns, as long as the 3 different columns, or as long as all of your columns add up to 12, you can go in, and I'm making this column now 2 columns wide. And if you look here, now I have a small column on the left, big column in the middle, and a column on the right. Okay, so this is depending on how you want the page to look, you can do some different things. So what I'll do for now is let's go back to the 2 column wide. Okay, so now I have 2 columns wide. All right, so let's start adding some content in the column. So we go to the Add Content button, and now again we go back to the options that we have. Maybe what I want to do here is I want to create a title, some title text, some text that's bigger than the text that's going to be in the body. So what I'll do is I'll say title, add. And every time I click one of these different visual shortcodes, I get a different dialog box, and that dialog box is customized towards what the type of content is that I'm putting in the system. So now this is the title text, and I'm going to say this is a title text item. So I determine what I want to give this particular text is from a style standpoint, and the styles go from the header 1 all the way down to header 6. And then this page title style is a style specifically made for page titles. So let's go ahead and use that. So now I've got the style is page type. The bold weight, again, thinner weight to a thicker weight, and you can mess around with this and experiment if you'd like. And then you've got some options here to make the text centered, or you can take and add some lines below it. These are part of the shortcode feature of this particular theme. So I'll hit save. Now you can see that I have the title is in here under the column that I want. So let's add some text now below the title text in this particular column. I want to go to the column, add, and now let's go ahead and we're going to use HTML, which is the closest thing to freeform text that we have in using the visual shortcodes. So now we had add, and notice now that the text format turns into CKEditor. So CKEditor is what's called a WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get editor, and it gives you the ability to not have to put code in, but you can go ahead and type in text. So in this particular case, let's go ahead and put in some lorem ipsum generator. Okay, and now what we'll do is this is just filler text, and let's say we're going to put in 5 paragraphs, and let's just do 3 paragraphs. Generate it, and here's my paragraphs, and I'll go ahead and copy these in. So now when I go in and paste this information in, as you can see now I have text in here. Okay, the WYSIWYG editor does give you the ability to go and do some bolding if you want to do some minor things to the type. You can, but again, the idea is to try to not get too fancy with your content editing, so that it doesn't detract from the overall look of the theme of the site. Okay, the design of the site. So again, as we go in here now, I can separate my my paragraphs. Let's say maybe on this one side I want to have just these 2 paragraphs of text, and then the other column I'll put more in. Use the WYSIWYG editor to put in text at the basic level. Try not to do a whole lot of manipulation of this text, because it's really you want to let the style, the theme layer of the site do most of the work for you, as far as how the thing is going to look and what it gives the type and the fonts and all that type of thing. So in this particular case, if I wanted to put an image in, I really should not have put it in here, even though there's capabilities to do it. What I should do is I should use the short codes to do that. So how would I do that? Well, what I would do is I would come in, and again, I've got the text here that I want in the columns, in the column, and I'm going to go add, and I will add an image now. And when I add the image, again, it gives you this nice robust dialog box for the image. And I choose my image that I want, and again, I can go back and upload it manually if I want to upload it, but I'm going to use, for the sake of the demonstration here, just going to use an existing image that we have, and hit submit. And so now what it does is it gives me the ability to, what kind of image that you can have. It rounded corners, you can do hover effects and all this kind of stuff. And this is stuff that you can play around with if you want to, just to get different different looks. Color box means that when I click on this image, it's going to open it up in a full screen window, and so you can disable color box if you want. And if I want to come in and I want to make this image smaller than it actually is, and I think these are large images, what I'll do is let's make this thing like 200 pixels wide, and it'll lock the aspect ratio. So if I go here and I hit save, now the image is going to be in here, and I've got the image below the text, and then over here the same thing. So what I'm going to do is hit save. Now look at the image I have, and there it is. It's down at the bottom. That's a little small. Here's an example of the color box. That's what that does. Okay, so what I can do is I can come in and edit this image fairly easily. Let's say let's go default and see what it looks like. Okay, that looks a little bit better in this particular setting. So there you go. You've got text in there. You've got the title text. Again, you click on that, and that will show full screen. So this would be, I guess, where you would be able to put in your bylaws and legislation. If you wanted to make it multiple columns, you can make it multiple columns. You can make it 3 columns, or whichever you want. But this is the general gist of how you go and add content. Again, content, add. You just have to be thinking about the type of content that you want to put in. I don't think you guys have the polls or the web forms. I think your main option is going to be blog, event gallery, or newsletter, or page. And again, page is static content. Blog is kind of a news content, like update type content, as is news as well. Those are kind of redundant. And then the event gallery is where you would put pictures for the slideshows. If you want to go in and edit existing content, instead of going to content and add content, you go to content and click on the top menu. It will now show you all of the different pieces of content that are added in, what type of content they are, and when they, what their status, are they published or not, when they were last updated. So what I could do is I could go into the bylaws and legislation, and I could edit it, and it takes me back to the shortcut, the settings that I had set before. So if I have to make edits, I can do that. You also, though, have the ability, now when we go into, for members now, here's our bylaws and registration. That's where I put it. So you can actually go in, and on each page you have the ability to edit it as well. In that particular case, you have multiple ways of getting to that content. The access control, this is set by default, and what I'm going to do for the sake of this, because we are on the live site, is I'm going to take this view any page, view own page, there we go. I'm going to turn these off. So basically what this is settings for the piece of content. All right, it has defaults that allow members, active members, to view the content, and then the membership chair and the conference manager and the administrator. These set here allow them to view the content, to view their own content, to edit the content, or to edit their own, and then delete content. So how this works is that the least amount of access to the full access is how these designations, these roles work. And most of the time we're not going to go into inactive members or authenticated users. We're going to keep these blank. We're going to either be turning things on for active members or for for member chair or something like that. But again, now if I was to go in, let's say create a blank login and go to Judicial Florida. Okay, if I looked at this now, like right now on the site, they can't get to the content we just created because it's in a menu that's hidden. Okay, so but the idea here is that this is an unauthenticated user, and so that's why I can't see the other content that's on there. But if I go to the setting that I'm already on and I'm logged in as a site administrator, I can see all the other content. So what I just did was I changed this to where right now if a member logged in, the member would be able to go and see the bylaws sitting down here, and I don't want them to be able to do that while we're working on them. So I should have done that probably at the beginning. But right now the bylaws are sitting in a place on the menu here that I don't necessarily want, so I want to move them up and down. Well, remember we talked about this a little earlier. When you're editing the content at the very bottom, you can use this weight here. So this is kind of, think of this like water level. If you want something to rise in the water, you make it go up, and if you want it to sink down lower, you make it go down. So right now this is theoretically is as low as it can go. Rather than messing with this, what I typically do is I'll go into the structure menu feature and click on the menus and go to the main menu. This lists the menu links, and as you can see here, there's some things that are disabled, but right now what I have is under the for members section, I have the bylaws down here, and I can just take and drag this up where I want it to go. So maybe what I do is I want to put it right there between the circuit reps and the member directory and put the bylaws and legislation. So now I hit save, and when I go in now, the bylaws and legislation are in a different spot. So again, you can go in and under structure, menus, you can go and either hit the main menus button or hit the main section for menus, or you can go into the main menu, actual menu itself, which is this menu here at the top. Okay, you can go in and edit that menu directly, or you can go into the content, and at the bottom of the content you have menu settings that you can go and put the menu settings there. Okay, so again, just to kind of recap this, content, if you click on content, that's where you look at existing content. Okay, you can also go and add content from here, but the quickest way is usually to use the admin menu bar at the top. Content, add content. The key here is to remember think about what kind of content you're creating. Blog content is content that's kind of an update type content, announcements and things like that. Event gallery is your slideshow of pictures from an event, from whatever event it was, whether it be a conference or whether it be another event. News is similar to blog in the sense that it's just organizational news. And then node export you're not going to see, and poll and web form I don't think you'll see either. Page is really the main static content, like the About Us or the Contact Us. That's those type of pages. So most of the time you're going to be using either page, news, blog, or event gallery. Okay, so content, add content and choose the one that you want. To go and edit it, you can go content and just click on content and it'll take you to this page here, or you can go and go directly to whatever page you want to look at and say bylaws, and then I want to go and I can edit it right here on the spot. Okay, so the thing to think about with content is that it's like filling out a form. When you go, you got to give it a title, and then you go to find find whatever the content type is. It's going to give you certain specific things. Like in the case of the event gallery, it's going to ask you to start uploading pictures, and you're going to add files, and you click on this, and it'll say, okay, go out and find pictures that I want to use, and then it'll upload those. You want to give it categories so that you can search it, and they'll show up as well. Most of this information at the bottom of the screen, like the URL alias, or the revisions, or the author, most of this type of stuff you don't have to mess with. It can be left at the default unless specifically you want to either make the date that you authored it before you actually authored it, or maybe after. Or let's say you want to not publish this particular piece of content because you're not ready yet. Other than that, I would really recommend that you let the system automatically generate the aliases for it so that those stay consistent. And then again, if you need to do the revisions, that's something that will be turned on as needed. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for this particular instructional on how to add page content. And if you have any questions, please shoot me an email just actually shoot me an email through the website, because it's probably going to be easier for you to do than remembering my email. Go to the Contact Us, and under the category, put website feedback, and just say, I need help, and then put your message in down here, okay, and blah 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 blah, and then go ahead and send the message, and that will send it to my email address. Okay, so this is Dan Deese with Electric Data Systems, and I hope that you find this useful.